Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, out here for another review, and today I'm talking about this guy right here, which is the Battle Axe by AMTAC Blades. It's pretty rad. I'm going to go ahead and open with, yes, this thing's actually very expensive, and as far as use case, it's probably outside of most people's use case as well, but having said all that, it's super rad and it does a lot of things really good. So we'll get into, I guess we'll start with kind of design elements and where I started with this thing. Something that is important that I get across is this is a weapon that can be used as a tool, not to be confused with a tool that can be used as a weapon. Big difference there. i.e. you can have whatever, fill in the blank. You could have a steak knife. It's pretty good at cutting steak, not the best weapon. You can absolutely press it into service as a weapon, but it's pretty good at cutting steak. Conversely, you can cut down trees. I've definitely done it with this. You can even split wood. It is not very good for that. And honestly, with respect to cutting trees down, again, not very good. It's a weapon that can be used as a tool. So with that, design elements and what makes this thing so rad. Well, the more I've kind of learned about blades just in general, like knives, for example, the more, one, I've realized the waters are deep and you start to see things depending on what their actual application is. It gets really narrow really quick. By way of example, a knife. There's tons of knives. Go into a truck stop, full of them, glass case. And then you're like, well, I want one that I could use for defensive use, like a weapon, hopefully defensive use. At which point it narrows as far as like, okay, well, the way this is designed, the blade geometry, all these different things fall off the wayside. Handle design, all of these things. Very quickly you end up with something pretty narrow as far as like, this is the way as far as a blade that you would use defensively. Then you come to the sheath. Gets really narrow really quick again. There's some amazing knives out there, and who cares, you'll never carry them because sheath is hot garbage. And honestly, that's true for most knives across the board, really and truly. There'll be great knives, amazing knives. Mora, for example, the Mora knives, they're amazing. The sheath is garbage. Like, you can't find a better knife for the money, but the sheath is just hot garbage. And it's one of those where, hey, tell me about that really cool carry gun that's in your safe, but you're carrying a pocket 380 because it actually carries well versus this other thing. And so if something doesn't carry well, you just won't have it on you, so it's a non-starter. And so all of these stuff, it narrows down very quickly. So a couple things. One, we'll get into the actual design of the axe, and it 100% is made as a weapon. But also it comes to carriage, because if you don't have a meaningful way of carrying something, then you won't carry it. And it's like, hey, check out my really cool defensive battle axe. I mean, at this point, you're pretty much going offensive. But let me show you this really cool axe behind the seat of my car or on the shelf at home, whatever it may be. Because if there's not a practical way of carrying it, then it's not on your person and it can't actually be used. All that to say, they did a great job of figuring out how to actually make this manageable with respect to it carrying it. The way this sheath is actually made, it's basically made to be carried on their strong side and deployed straight into a strike. And so the way it's done, you have basically these leather wings. Give you guys a close-up of it in a minute. But these leather wings goes on your belt and rides right here. Then you have the snap. You undo that, at which point you can go ahead and hook your fingers in here, and that allows you to draw this straight up and out. And so the way that would actually work, when this thing is on your belt, you'd essentially hook it here, you come out straight into a strike, which we'll go into design in a minute. You can absolutely strike with this thing. That is actually pretty cool because straight out the gate, you can actually carry this. I worked on carrying it somewhat like that for a while, and one, it absolutely works. Two, it takes up real estate, like more than I want to give up at a place I'd rather not give it up. So what I've actually ended up doing is carrying it like this, which actually works out really well. And so the way this thing sheaths is it goes into sheath like that, and then the blade rocks down into it. The snap comes over here. This is basically that exact same sheath. I just have it mounted horizontally. And, oh, I forgot to do that. I'll do that in a second. So this basically rides right here on your back. Again, you can still deploy it pretty much straight into a strike. And also, I've kind of played with some different things to include bill as well, to where when you sheath this thing, you run this piece of, you can use anything. I have some shot cord right there, and so it slides through. So what that does is it basically takes it and just keeps the end from sticking out. And so then you can go ahead and wear your belt set up, and you have your blade back there at essentially 6 o'clock. And it gives you access to reach around behind you. You can set it up either way. I haven't ran into issues with the snap accidentally coming undone. Personally, I like actually having to come under it to release that snap. And then same thing, you reach in, this thing is behind you. We come straight out into our strike. How fast is that draw stroke coming out? Not as fast as I would like it. It's not one of those like, oh, in reactionary gap, boom, bring this thing out. I say you can bring it into a strike because you absolutely can. Ideally, time and opportunity, appropriate time to deploy a weapon. Why would you deploy a weapon like this? Well, if you went Winchester on ammo, like, well, I won't do that. And if I do, I'll go to hands. Okay, you go to hands, I will go to this. Or you're like, I will go to a knife. Cool. I like knives too. Do I want to go into the fight of my life with this or with this? Probably with this. Like, reach is very real. It's a real thing. So, yeah, there can be a case made for this. Again, are most people going to carry it? Probably not. Of those that carry it, are they going to train with it? Probably even fewer. But we'll get into the design elements because it 100% is a weapon. So there are out there a number of axes, tomahawks, things like that, and they're all largely compromised. Keep in mind, this is a compromise too. Everything at the end of the day is a compromise. When I say most of those are compromised, in the sense that usually a really short handle, because they're like, oh, I want this to be really easy to carry. At which point, for all intents and purposes, you just have a knife that you're wielding with the blade like projected out in front of where your hand is, which I guess is fine, but there is absolutely no force versus having this thing here and the amount of force you can generate swinging this thing like an axe. So that is why it is as long as it is. I will say, does that come with a tail? It does. It is not as easy to carry. And while I actually really like carrying it at my back, even though it's only sticking out like that much, you'd be surprised how many things you run into. Just, you get a spatial awareness of like how big you are and walking around. And then like anything, throw a backpack on, all of a sudden you bump into stuff because you're like, oh, my body is now bigger than it was. So that is real. But what you get from that is an incredible amount of power that you can generate swinging this thing. So different design elements. One, you have this, which for all intents and purposes, almost like a puño. And the biggest thing is it keeps your hand hooked. So one, you can generate a lot of power with this out or without this coming out of your hand. And in addition to that, as you start to fatigue, it'll help keep your hand on there. The other thing is this bearded style like Norman axes, where you can actually choke all the way up on here. What that allows, one, is for you to actually bring this thing out in a way to deploy it. The other more important thing, though, is it gives you options for actually utilizing this thing, to include choking up to where you can actually thrust, and because of this tip, you can thrust either like that, or if your hand's down here, you can still thrust like that. Quite a bit of reach. And then the other thing is you can basically punch with this thing. Your hand's protected, there's a blade out in front of it, and yeah, you can do that. why isn't there a spike back here? They look really cool. They do until you use them. And then, like, what are they for? I want to break glass. Break glass with that. You can break it all day long. You could use it as an impact weapon. You can hammer things. You can do all kinds of stuff. Most importantly, though, is that makes it very hard to self-inflict. So you get in the fight of your life, there's nothing that says this thing won't get pushed back into you. May very well. Whether you fall down, people crash into you, whatever. A spike coming back into you, like, man, not a good day. That, you can do that all day, no big deal. The other thing is I can power assist. Whether I can power assist like that, or if this comes in, I can power assist my shoulder. You can knee that into a power assist down, like whatever. You can smash this and drive this blade deep into whatever you're trying to put this thing in. But Ivan, how is it at splitting wood? Not good. Again, think about an axe or a maul. It's basically a big wedge. An axe is just a smaller wedge as far as dimensionally. This is very small. This is made for cleaving deep into tissue. So yeah, suboptimal for splitting wood, but it will split wood if you need to. Something else worth mentioning with this beard here is, well, a couple things. One, as far as best practice, essentially always maintaining your dominant hand, shifting like that. But what this allows is, especially when we're back here, is you to grab things. Think about behind the knee, behind the leg. I'm not going to do this to myself other than to say behind the neck, drag someone. Believe me, they will go exactly where you want them to go because no one wants to put pressure back into that, especially on the back of your neck. So you can absolutely control people and drag them, make them move where you need to move them. A lot of design elements in this, which I guess brings us full circle from this axe to this axe. This right here being one of the super early pre-production prototypes that I originally got. I want to say this would have been 2023. I think like summer 2023, because one, I needed a blade. I think it was a 5-inch blade. It's more than 5 inches. So I ended up reaching out to my buddy Bill. I was like, hey, I need a blade because I'm going to, and I think it was the High Desert Brutality 2023, I think it was. And I was like, hey, what do you have that I could use? And he was like, well, working on this axe. And so over the next couple days, and keep in mind, when I needed a blade for that competition, people are thinking like, oh yeah, like a 5-inch blade. Like it's just part of the loadout for their, I forget the division, but you needed a blade, water, med kit, all these other things for that competition. So I'm like, I got your 5-inch blade. So I ended up talking to Bill. He and his oldest son ended up cranking this thing out over the next like 2 days or something like that. I went up there and got it from him, or maybe he dropped it off. Maybe he's headed to the airport. Final fitting on this thing, and I was like, man. Also, this thing came razor sharp, like scary sharp. And he went over kind of quick, like down and dirty, how to use it, deploy it, things like that. I'm like, awesome. And then I took it and had it in that competition. There was one stage we actually used it, which it was actually pretty fun. Rather than draw a knife out, which I think I did because I shot 2 different divisions, had this thing out, boom, cleave down. It was cool, but that's where this came from. And I'll show you the differences because it came a long ways. Arguably, the thing that came along the furthest is the actual sheath. Again, pre-production prototype. As you can see on here, like all this marking, never bothered wiping it off with the Sharpie as far as where holes are going to be, how it's going to get cut, different things like that. And originally, it did not come with basically any way to attach it. I needed to attach it, and so I ended up using these guys right here, which are the Tigris, I always forget, basically these loops. So it went on my belt kind of at an angle a little bit like that. Also, it was originally just a friction lock as far as how this thing sat in there. And I'm like, well, this thing's razor sharp. if it comes out, I'm probably going to die. So let's figure something out. So I ended up taking these guys right here, which are the pull the dot snaps, which they actually use in the production ones. And those right there, I believe I pulled them straight off of a holster I had. It might have been a floodlight holster. Pulled them off there. I put one back there and I put one there. Basically double redundancy is what it came down to, because I'm like, I do not want to die in the middle of the shooting competition, like running, dragging things, jumping over stuff, and have this thing come out and kill me to death. So I ended up with a strap there and a strap there. Final product ended up here with basically one long strap that comes all the way over the top. Also just way cleaner as far as that final design of the sheath itself, and also just the way that it actually goes in, kind of like a holster there. This sheaths or resheaths way cleaner, way easier, and yeah, huge design improvements. Again, pre-production prototype. As far as the actual blade geometry, things like that, pretty much stayed almost exactly the same, little differences. Like right here, again, not with respect to blade geometry, but like you have an eyelet there, essentially where you can put a lanyard if you want. Original one didn't have it. Also, just from a production standpoint, like these scales are, one, they're a little more square, which helps to kind of fill the hand more than this one. This one's definitely thinner, and it's just way better and cleaner, all the scallops, everything like that. Biggest difference, honestly, being the steel. I think this was made out of, like 1085 or something like that, because it was just, again, proof of concept, pre-production prototype. This, I believe, is AEBL, which is a really good stainless steel, so won't rust or anything like that. But I had the pre-production one. Spent a lot of time with it, carried it a lot. I didn't hack anyone up. Usually, honestly, use it for camp chores out in the backcountry, stuff like that. Then he's like, yeah, well, do you want to come make one of the real ones, like the production one? I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that. So I went up there and had the opportunity to actually make this one myself. Come to find out, it is a lot of work. And yes, these are actually made here in the US in North Idaho, about an hour north of me. And man, is a lot of work. And so started out as basically a water jetted, I believe it was water jetted blank, and essentially had to get this primary grind on here, which you're like, oh, that's pretty simple. Yeah, probably simple, just not easy. Actually really difficult. And so you essentially end up etching a line on the spine of the steel to show you where the center is. And then you're just slowly, one, trying to maintain the correct angle as you're grinding this thing, and just slowly removing material on one side, go back to the other side, slowly remove material, till you finally get done with that grind, which, granted, I don't do this every day, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that was like a couple hours of kind of stressful work, because you do not want to mess it up. Otherwise, well, I guess your blade would just shrink a lot, or you pretty much have to scrap that blank and start over. So eventually got that done. That was basically just kind of step one. After that, again, because we are removing a lot of material. So once that was done, this could actually go to heat treat. And then after heat treat, man, still so much work. But it was so cool to actually get a hand, or not even get a hand in it, like literally do it, and go through the entire process of building this battle axe out. Coming away from that, one, I have an amazing battle axe that I actually made, which is really cool unto itself. And two, it definitely made me appreciate why this thing's as expensive as it is. Made here in the US, with hours and hours of people putting their hands on this to get it to the final product. Like, I get it. Small shop, paying Americans living wages. Yes, it's expensive. I opened with that. It's $900, I want to say. That's really expensive. And yeah, you can go get a Fisker's hatchet and like duct tape the carrier onto your belt and you're halfway there, I guess. I don't know. Again, weapon, not a tool. It's a weapon you can use as a tool, but it is not a tool that you can use as a weapon. Like, purpose built 100% and made here in the US. But it was a really cool experience, and since then, again, haven't hacked anyone up with this thing. Most of the time has been out in the backcountry, stuff like that. But yeah, this thing is really cool. And speaking of weapons, if it's a weapon you're going to carry, you should probably actually get in some reps and do some training. So is there a trainer? Absolutely is, which, let's appreciate this right here. This is basically the super early pre-production prototype trainer that went with my super early pre-production battle axe. It did not fit in the same sheath, and this sheath is actually, your live blade will not fit in this. This sheath is specific to this trainer axe, which is definitely, man, came a long ways. And so the way it's set up though is you can use it the exact same way. Like, it'll draw out the same everything, same mounting hardware, all of that stuff. And now you have your trainer. So this allows you to actually train one, either with a partner. Granted, you're not going full speed, full power with this. You wreck someone with either of these. Like, you can swing this thing really hard. But allows you to, one, either train with a partner at a percentage, or you can pretty much go full speed, full power on Bob, like a training dummy or something along those lines, whether you're doing template work or whatever it may be. So with all of that said, who do I think this battle axe is good for? Honestly, a really small group of people. On the one hand, it is expensive, budgets are real, I get it. And if you can afford it, how many people are, one, even if you can afford it, how many people are going to buy it? Out of those people, how many people actually intend and are going to carry it? And out of that incredibly small number, how many people of those are actually going to put in training with this thing? Honestly, probably a really small number, like a really small number. But for what it is, it's incredible. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there that are just like, man, that's cool. Like, I just want to own it, which is great because it's your money to do whatever you want with. Again, not a tool. A weapon that can be used as a tool, not a tool that can be used as a weapon. 100% designed as a weapon. Again, made here in the US, AEBL, steel, and yeah, they're pretty cool. I get it. Probably not for everyone, but if you are interested, there'll be a link down below and you can go check it out. And as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.